So hello guys, and welcome to another Trials of the Michi Bushido video. This is episode 2. So firstly, thanks to everybody that commented on the first episode. I've had a lot of really positive feedback. A lot of you guys seem interested in Bushido. If you haven't watched it yet, go back and have a watch. I talked just a brief introduction about Bushido, what it is, the background of the game, a little bit of the stuff that I liked and that intrigued me. So go back and watch that if you haven't, and if you're here watching this one, you probably watched the first one, so thanks for that. Please put comments in. It seems after doing the video that there is actually a lot more Bushido players out there than I'd originally thought, so it does seem to be quite a thriving game. It seems to be a bit like Fight Club. If any of you have watched it, it's like an underground movement that nobody talks about, so hopefully videos like this will bring it into the fore and just show how popular the game is. I have now had my first proper game. I played Headley, who is a local around here, and Koketsu on the forums, who has done some absolutely stunning paint jobs. I think some of his models were some studio painting a while back. He seems a fantastic player. He was brilliant showing me the ropes. We had a little 3-on-3 sort of 25 rice game where we just went through some melee exchanges. He used his Temple of Rokan against three of my ninjas, and then we did a bigger game where he brought his Ito snakes against me. He had 5 models against 3 of my ninjas. Again, I used the same 3 ninjas, so in a future episode I'm going to talk through my ninjas for you. I'm going to show a video of them painted up. I've now managed to paint them all. Very basic paint job, but just to get them at tabletop standard so that I can actually play with them. I've also started designing a Bushido board, so I'll do a video as well showing you what I've done there. Just a very quick, cheap job for now. Hopefully we'll be building lots more in the future. Thank you for coming and watching. I know you're stuck with just me again in this video. What I'm planning on doing is just going through in a bit more detail the stat cards, just to show you what is on them and what they represent. For any of you new players to the game, these are very much a learning Bushido set of videos to start with. I will be going on to battle reports, maybe some question and answer sessions, maybe some round-table chats with some of my buddies that are playing locally, and lots and lots and lots of match reports, hopefully. Battle reports, sorry, I'm in Guild Ball mode, match reports, battle reports. So hopefully you'll enjoy those. On to the good stuff then, the stat cards. For those who want to have a look, I didn't mention it in the previous ones, if you go onto the Bushido website, Bushido the game, you can actually download all of the rules, the rule book for free. You can have a look at all of the models on their store catalogue, and they all come with stat cards for each model. So you can have a look at all of those free before you buy anything to see which guys you fancy, see which ones fit into your playstyle, so that you can make an educated decision before you buy them. I did just buy my ninjas based on the aesthetics. It's always a good way to go. If you enjoy the look of models, you tend to paint them up quicker to enjoy that and get them on the table quicker. But each to their own, they are on there if you want to have a look. So I'm going to go through probably 2 stat cards just to try and talk through the basics. The first one I'm going to do is called Kenko, who is a monk from the Temple of Rokan. Very cool model, very dynamic, and he comes in the starter box for the Temple of Rokan, so if you go on the website and have a look at him, he's a traditional sort of monk, bare-topped, muscly, martial arts expert. So I'll pop the card up on screen now, so you'll be able to have a look at it while I'm talking through. So, starting on the front of his card, you can see the name at the top, Kenko, and the picture of him, very monk-looking, and his first stat. So top right is a little logo of who he fights for. So the Temple of Rokan is a bonsai tree. There's certain models that can play for dual factions, and they will have a different stat card for each faction with slightly different abilities, so that's quite cool. I've got one of my ninjas that can play for the Prefecture of Ryu as well as my Kaje faction. So the first one looks like 2 samurai swords on the top right, and that is a number usually between 0 and 4. This basically denotes the number of dice you get in your dice pool when you engage in a melee combat. So 4 is quite high. Kenko has 4 himself, so he is quite good in hand-to-hand combat. Then there are ki symbols next to them. So these 2 round white circles denote how many ki that you need to spend in order to boost that statistic by 1. So during a melee exchange you can spend 2 ki, which we will come on to in a bit, to boost that to 5. That just means then it increases your chances of success. So when you're engaged, I've mentioned it in the previous video, when you're going into melee with somebody, you determine how many dice you want to roll for attacking and how many you want to roll for defending. You do that in secret, and then you roll simultaneously with whoever you're engaged with, which adds a nice complexity to it. You can put all of them into attack or all of them into a defense, depending on what it is you plan, or a mixture of both, and then you resolve. The active model, usually, unless there's any special abilities, gets to do their attacks first against the defender. So what you tend to do is you take your highest dice roll, and then you can add on an additional 2 dice that are successes, and a success is anything between 2 and 6. 1 is a failure. 2 to 5 you can +1 to your roll, and an additional 6 you get +2. So for example, you rolled a 5, a 3 and a 3. Your initial roll is the 5. The 2 additional 3s add +1 each, so your final total is 7. You can then compare that total to your defender's total, and then the difference between the 2 is your success level. Once you've determined your success, you can look on this lovely wounds chart. So you get a card as well. You get some pack of additional cards for additional equipment and abilities. These come with a wounds chart. So you look on the wound chart, it's got the success level along the top. You just have a look at where you are. So for example, if I got a 7 as an attacker and the defender got a 5, the difference between the 2 is a 2. So I look on the 2 column on the wounds chart. Whenever you do a damage roll, initially, unless you have any special abilities, you roll 2 dice and you add the 2 dice together, and that determines where you have to look on this wounds chart for how much damage you do. There are special abilities, special weapons, special attacks that add on to the damage roll. As we'll have a look as we work down the stat card, there are modifiers to that damage roll as well on there. So there we've discussed the melee stat. The one below that looks like it's a bow and arrow, that's their ranged dice pool. So if they've got a ranged attack, or if they're very good at ranged attack, as you can see on Kenko's card, his is 0. So at the moment he doesn't have a ranged attack. So he's really all about the melee. He doesn't have any shooting attacks. Other models do. And then next down is their movement stat. So there's a foot, which is how many inches they can move. So Kenko can move 4. I think the standard, what I've seen, tends to be 4. So the majority of people can move 4 inches. Again, as with the melee attack, there's 2 key tokens, two key icons next to it, so you can boost that up to 5 if you spend 2 key. And then just while we're on the movement, for a simple skill, you can either just walk, which is your base stat, which is 4, or you can run, which is actually 1.5 times your move stat. So in this instance you'd be able to go 6, and that just means you can move around a bit quicker. For a complex action you can actually charge somebody, which means it's actually 2 times your stat, so you can charge 8 inches, Kenko can, and then perform a melee attack after. Charging also adds +2 to your damage roll, so there is a benefit for charging in. But it is a complex action, so the model will go all the way from rested to exhausted, skipping through tired, which in itself again does negative modifiers when you're attacking somebody if they're exhausted, so it is a bit of a gamble sometimes doing a charge. The next one down is their ki statistic. So Kenko's is 2/8, so the first number is the amount of ki this model generates at the start of the turn, so he gets a 2 ki tokens at the start of his turn, and as we've seen above, you can spend those ki on adding to your statistics. And the second number of 8 for Kenko is the maximum he can have on him at any one time. These ki don't clear at the end of the turn, so they're cumulative. You would get another 2 if you didn't spend them in the first turn. You get another 2 next turn, and you've now got 4 up until 8. When you use a ki feat or you boost your statistics, that's how you remove them. There are certain models in the game that can move ki around between models or even steal opponents' models. So that's pretty cool. So that's sort of the base statistics. Let's move on to the traits now. So these are special abilities for each model. I'll quickly go down Kenko's. I don't know them all off by heart, but they are all in the rulebook for you to have a look at. But these just add a bit of flavour beyond the base statistics. So Kenko has bravery. So what this does, it means you can re-roll fear tests. When you target a model that has fear, you have to roll a dice just to see whether you're petrified or frightened and whether you can actually complete that action. I've seen some models so far with fear 5, and that just means you need to get a 5 on a dice roll. Whenever you're doing these, I think you use your ki as the initial ki statistic as your initial dice pool. So Kenko, for example, would have 2 dice, and he would roll to try and get a 5 on either of those dice. What's important I've only realised recently, is that with these target number tests, unlike ranged attacks and melee attacks, you don't get to add on additional dice to increase your roll. It is just on your base dice roll. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That's how I understand it at the moment. Put in the comments if I'm wrong. But I think you get to roll. So that makes sort of a fear of 5 really powerful, because you have to actually get a 5 or a 6 on a dice roll, or 2 dice rolls for Kenko. Whereas if it was the other way, you could add additional ones on. So just the base dice. The next one is indomitable. I've hashed up saying that, and then a 1 in brackets. So this means that Kenko can, indomitable means he ignores the outnumbered by whatever is in the bracket. So he can ignore 1 additional outnumbered model when he's engaged in combat. So normally when you're outnumbered, you lose a dice from your dice pool, whereas Kenko doesn't lose a dice, but only for the first model that's outnumbering him. So he's actually quite good at engaging multiple models or 2 models at once. He doesn't get those negative modifiers. It fits in with him being sort of a martial arts expert. The next one is really good. That's called Jump Up. This basically means at the start of his activation, if he's prone, which is lying on the floor, normally you have to take a simple action to stand up, which would tire you and use up your activation. Whereas for Kenko and anybody else with Jump Up, it means he basically gets to remove prone at the start of his activation, so he doesn't use any simple actions to remove that. So that's cool for Kenko. He doesn't mind being knocked down. And the next one is ranged defense for him, ranged defense 1. So this just means that when somebody's trying to target him with a ranged ability, he gets +1 to the target number, so he's harder to hit, which makes sense if he's got no ranged attacks himself and he likes to be in combat. It gives him a little extra stage of protection. So normally when you're doing ranged attacks, depending on the range, if you're at short range, the base number is a 4 or higher. For medium range it's 5 or higher, and for long range it's a 6. But if you're attacking Kenko, he gets a +1 to that, so that's really cool. The next one is split attack. So this just means that when Kenko goes in to fight multiple models at once, if he charges in or if he attacks people, he can split his attacks against both models. Normally you can't do that. You have to target one of them. So Kenko has the ability to hit 2 models at once, and with his coupled with his indomitable ability, his trait, he doesn't lose dice for either. So he's got 4 as standard, so you could put 2 dice against each model, which makes him really good in combat. So that's Kenko's traits. There's lots of different traits that are in the rulebook that you can have a look at, but they're just Kenko's. Now we move on to feats. So for Kenko, these are slightly more complicated. They don't have any ki. Normally they would have ki tokens next to each one to say how many ki tokens you need in order to activate that special feat. There are different symbols. So both of Kenko's have got an eye. That means that they're instant ki feats, which means that you can use them at any time. Usually Usually they're not classed as an action, so they don't tire you. They can be done as well as doing a melee attack, or as well as moving or doing a ranged attack. What's cool about this is you can also, unless it's there's a certain stage during the melee where you can use instant key feats. There are certain abilities that means you can attack first if you're in a combat, and you can play these abilities as instant key feats. Both of Kenko's are instant, so when he's either being attacked or when he's attacking someone himself, he can play them. The first one for him is called Fists of Iron. We mentioned I is instant. P stands for personal, which means it just affects him. There are lots of other symbols on some of them. So going down them, there's TA, which stands for target, which means you can target somebody within a certain range. There's a brackets with a number in, and that's the range. There's AU for aura, so it affects people within that aura. PU, which is a pulse, which is a one-time effect pulse, so it affects everybody within that pulse range. And then SP is special, and on the card there'll also be some special things for those feats. So Fist of Iron, we'll go through that one. This model gains a melee weapon strength bonus equal to X for the next damage roll this turn, where X is the number of key tokens spent. This may not be greater than 3. So basically this means for Kenko, when he is about to attack somebody or be attacked himself, he can do this instant key feat where he can spend up to 3 key to add that number to the damage roll. So this is really good, but to increase his chances of hurting somebody, or maybe taking them out, removing them from the game. And if you have the key to spend, it's worth it if you think that he's going to be successful on his attack. As we'll see, he also gets +1 to his damage roll because of his melee weapon, but we'll move on to that in a second. The next one is Body of Oak. So this is a defensive ability, and again it's an instant one, so you can play it at any time, and it's on him, just on himself. And this is the same, but it's basically for armour. He can spend up to 3 key to give himself armour up to 3 until the current action is resolved. So if he's being attacked and he wants to be defensive and he doesn't want to take as many wounds, he can give himself up to armour 3. He doesn't have any armour as standard. And armour, I'll have to just double check, but I think armour reduces the damage roll result. There is also toughness, which reduces the actual damage you take. So there's a slight distinction between the two. Armour. So armour reduces the result of the damage roll made against this model. So this actually, before you work out how many wounds you take, you reduce the damage roll by the number of armour. So 3 is a great thing to be able to reduce it by. It just means he is less likely to take as much damage. Toughness, just while I'm here, just bear with me. Elemental PQR. Toughness. When this model would suffer wounds, reduce the final number of wounds by X. So this, as I mentioned, is after you've done the damage roll and you've worked out how many wounds that model will take. Toughness reduces that number by whatever is in the brackets for toughness. But Kenko has armour. Next, further down, we have any special attacks or defences that the models have. On the left is another red circle which has 2 samurai swords, which shows any modifiers to the damage roll for the melee attack, and Kenko has +1, so every time he does a damage roll he can add +1 to the damage roll, which, coupled with his Fists of Iron feat, means he could potentially go to +4 on his damage roll if he spends 3 ki, which makes him really powerful in combat. If he had any ranged weapons, this would also be down at the bottom, and there'd be a bow and arrow that had any plus or minus modifiers. My ninjas can have shurikens equipped to them, and I think they are -1 or -2 to the damage roll, so they are quite weak when doing damage to people, which makes sense. And then, so special attacks and defences. Kenko has 2 special attacks, one called combo attack and one called slam attack, and he has a special defence called sidestep defence. Now, one thing which is quite important in Bushido is the order of events when you're engaged in a melee. Don't quote me on it because I've only played 1 game, but the defender, the player that doesn't have the initiative, that's not the active model, will declare their things first. So you determine your dice pools, and then you decide whether you're going to spend any ki to increase those dice pools. You then decide whether you're going to do any special attacks or defences, and when you do special attacks or defences, anything that has a number in brackets, for example Kenko's combo attack, that is how many dice you remove from your dice pool to activate this special ability. So Kenko's combo attack has got a 1 in bracket, so that means he has to take 1 dice off his dice pool if he wants to do a combo attack, and the same goes for slam attack. Now in defense, he has sidestep defense, which is a 0, so this is basically he can do it all the time. He doesn't remove any dice. However, you can only do one attack, or you can only do an attack or a defense. You can't do both, so you'd have to choose whether you want to do his sidestep defense or whether you wanted to do one of his attacks or neither. But as a 0 action, if you're going to do neither, you might as well do his defense one, because you don't remove any dice anyway. So he's a base attack of 4, or a base melee of 4. So if he wanted to do combo attack, it takes him down to 3, or slam attack. So combo attack, this basically is when you perform, just let me get it up on here as well. This is if you're successful after an attack, if your success level is 2 or higher, you get to do a second damage roll. So you reduce your success level by 2, and you can keep doing it. So you could, in effect, if for example, if your success level was 6 over your opponent's defense, you would initially do a damage roll on the 6 on the damage chart, and then you would move down to 4 and do a damage roll on the 4, and then you would move down to 2 and do a damage roll on the 2, and then you'd move down to the 0 and do a damage roll on the 0. So you'd actually get 4 damage rolls. So it makes him super powerful if you think that your success level is going to be quite high against your opponent, if they've got a really low melee, or if you've got additional modifiers to your damage roll like Kenko can. He can go to +4 on the damage on his damage roll, so you are likely to get a few damage rolls on these combo attacks. Slam attack I'm not as familiar with, so I'm just going to have a look at that. If the attack is successful, the defender is moved D3 directly away and becomes prone. The defender suffers half of the wounds from the damage roll. So in this instance, it's a good way of sort of pushing somebody away, but it does mean you do half the damage. So that's a nice ability. He can sort of run in, maybe if one of your own models is engaged that doesn't want to be engaged, he can run in and push them away to get them out of contact. Makes them prone as well, so as I've mentioned, if the model doesn't have jump up, they then have to use one of their actions to stand that model up. Really, really useful if the model is already tired that you're attacking, because it then would mean they would have to become exhausted just to stand up, which then means that's the end of the turn for that model. So this can be a really, really powerful ability. Sidestep defense basically means if you are successful in your defense, you get to make a 1-inch dodge to basically step out of the way to take you out of combat with them. So that's another really cool thing. I think all of my ninjas have sidestep defense, so they're all quite dodgy. If you don't manage to hit them, they get to dodge away from you, which just moves them out of melee or a little bit further away so they can then get free reign to do something during their action. So that's the main statistics. The other things just to touch on is there's a sort of a red bottle of liquid on the right of the front of the card. That shows how many wounds the model has. So Kenko has 6, so he can take 6 wounds before he's taken down. There are certain models that aren't unique characters, so they may have 1 or 2 bars on that health bar, and with an A or a B next to them, so that shows there are certain like villagers that you can have 2 of them or 3 of them, and the number of health columns that they have shows how many of that model you can take. And then the last one on the back of the card, it describes the feats, as you'll see on the screen now, in a bit more detail, and then also it has the rice cost of that model. So Kenko costs 9 rice. As we said, a normal starter game is about 35 rice, and a bigger full-on game is usually about 50, so Kenko himself would be 9 rice. All my ninjas are quite expensive. They are sort of between 10 and 12 or 13. I think there might be someone that's 13 rice, so they're quite expensive, but they do have lots of abilities. Kenko looks like a great model. So that's basically the stat cards, guys, in a little bit of detail. Sorry if I've got anything wrong or I've rushed through it all. Please put it in the comments if I have. Hopefully that will mean that you can go on the website and have a look at stat cards and kind of understand what it's showing you, what it's telling you. If their melee stats are high, if their ranged attacks are high, have a look at the health bar, any of the special abilities, reference it to the rulebook. All the information is available, so have a look at that. I'll quickly run through the modifiers for melee attacks and ranged attacks. I've mentioned some in passing when going through the cards. So melee modifiers, if the model is exhausted, if the model is frightened, or if the model is outnumbered, if the model is prone, if the model has performed a run, or if the model is surprised, all donate a -1 to the dice pool. So they are stackable as well. So if a model is exhausted and frightened, they lose 2 dice. If a model is outnumbered as well, they lose 3 dice. The minimum you can have during a melee or dice roll is 1, so you'll only ever take it down to 1. But it does show the benefits of attacking models that are already exhausted or are prone. For example, we saw Kenko with his slam attack. If he wants to run in and slam attack someone to make them prone, and then another one of your models runs in, they get the opponent that you're attacking is losing dice because they're prone or because they're exhausted. So that's a cool ability. And then ranged attacks, as I've mentioned, short range is a 4, medium range is 5, and long range is a 6. I didn't mention this before because Kenku doesn't have a ranged attack, but at the bottom, along where the special attacks or defences are, if they have a ranged attack, it will have a bow and arrow symbol in the bottom right, and it will have a range. It'll have 3 numbers with dashes, with hyphens, dashes, sorry, between them. For example, one of my ninjas, Kuhai, has 357, so that says 3 inches is short range, 5 is medium range, and 7 is long range. So that's how you know what your base stat is to start with. And then there are loads of additional modifiers depending on the size of the target, going from, if they're tiny, it's a +2 modifier. If they are huge, then they're -2 modifier, so it's much easier to hit them. If they're prone, again, there's a -1 target number modifier. If the target is in cover, +2. If the active model has performed a run, you're getting +1. So if you want to move and do a ranged attack, you're getting +1 a target number, so it's harder. The active model has moved or will move, then you also get +1. So there's lots of additional modifiers to the 4, 5 or 6 target number which you have to get. So that's basically melee attacks and ranged attacks. We've discussed some other target number stats, and that's the cards basically. I'll now quickly run through one of my ninjas just so that you can compare. So Kenko we've looked at. So Kuhai, who I've just mentioned, who has a ranged attack, I'll go down hers so you can compare them with Kenko's. So card will be up on screen now. So melee is 3. Now this time it's 3 key tokens to increase Kuhai's melee. So slightly worse than Kenko. You need to use 3 key to increase Kuhai's melee. Again, now Kuhai has a melee. She has melee statistic of a ranged ability of 3. So she gets 3 dice when she wants to do a ranged attack. And if you quickly scan down to the bottom of the card, on the bottom right you can see there's a bow and arrow there, which shows her ranged is 357, as I've mentioned, and she gets -1 to the damage roll, so she's slightly weaker. She has to reduce one of her by 1 her damage roll. And then she's got move of 4. Again, that can be boosted by 3 key if she wants to go to 5. She's got 2-8 key statistic, the same as Kenko. She's got loads of traits here. So as you can see, she's got ammo 3. That means that she can make 3 ranged attacks during the game, which is another cool thing. You can't just do unlimited ranged attacks. As you'd imagine, a model, a ninja, she's only equipped with a certain number of shurikens or darts, whatever it is that she's throwing, so she's only got 3, so you've got to be quite careful with your ranged attacks. She's got armor 1, so as we mentioned with Kenko, who can go up to armor 3, this just reduces the damage roll by 1 as base. Now Kuhei is an assassin, so all of my ninjas have this assassin ability. This basically means when you attack somebody from behind and you start and end your move when you engage someone in melee out of their line of sight, which is the front 180 degree arc, that you get to roll 3 dice when you do a damage roll and add up the 2 highest, rather than the normal 2 dice. So it really benefits these guys, these ninjas, when attacking someone from behind. What's also worth mentioning is when you engage in a melee, you turn the models so that they change facing, so that they're facing whoever they're attacking. So quite a good trick for the ninjas is one of your ninjas to go in and engage somebody from the side to make that model turn its facing, and then if there's another ninja on the other side, they then automatically get to, when they go in and attack them from behind, they get this assassin trait comes into play because they've attacked them from behind. So that's pretty cool. Camouflage 2. So I think again all my ninjas have camouflage 2, as you would imagine. If this model is in cover, so any part of its base is obstructed by any bit of terrain, they gain camouflage 2, and this means that no models can target them unless they're within 2 inches of them. So it makes the ninjas really difficult to do anything to if they're in cover. So it's quite good with a board with lots of cover. That's pretty cool. Light-footed means, the next one means that they can move through rough ground and terrain without any modifiers, so they can nip about the board. They don't really mind about difficult terrain. Lightweight is a really great ability I like. This basically means you ignore the modifier for moving and shooting, or moving and doing a ranged attack. So normally if you move and do a ranged attack, you have to get a +1 to your target number. Kuhei means that she can move and do it without having any modifiers, so she's really cool with that. She also has Sixth Sense. So models that get attacked from behind, as I've mentioned, there's the assassin thing that comes into play. Another thing is that they become surprised, so if you can attack them from behind, they have this surprise which gives them -1 to their dice pool, I believe. Let me just double check. Yeah, -1 to their dice pool in melee. So it's really good for my ninjas to attack people from behind. So Kuhai has Sixth Sense, which means she can never be surprised. So she basically has a sort of a 360 degree whatever it's called, zone of control. So she can't be surprised from behind. Now that's her traits. So her feats, she has Hail of Steel and Prediction. So Hail of Steel, as you'll see from the card, means that this model gains rapid fire 3 until the end of the current activation. This key feat may only be used once per turn. So this basically means every time she does a ranged attack, she can do 3 attacks at once, so she can fire 3 times in the same ranged attack. So the little symbols that we see here, so when there's a samurai sword with a red circle around it like this one, it means you can't do this ability in melee, which makes sense. She can't do her ranged attack when she's already fighting somebody. The next one is an A, so this means when she is the active, when it can be done during the when this player is the active player. It doesn't have to be during this model's activation. This is another thing I learnt during my first game. If it's got an A, it means it can be done any time during the active player's turn. It doesn't have to be this model's activation. So for example, Ghost, which is another one of my ninjas, has an A feat which is called Apparition, and this means he can do a 2-inch dodge. Now this means I can play it if I am the active player and I'm not actually activating Ghost. I can still do his A key feat because I'm the active player, so he can do a 2-inch dodge basically out of activation. I can then go on to activate Kuhai. So that's a really cool thing to remember. You can actually do these A abilities outside of your model's activation. And it's got a P, so again that one means that it's personal to Kuhai, it only affects her. So Hail of Steel is really cool. She can throw 3 ranged attacks at once. Next one is Prediction, which again is an A. It means it can be done at any point, not just during Kuhai's activation. So if I'm wanting to go with Ghost, I could do this Prediction first with Kuhai. This model's controller's opponent, so my opponent, must declare which model they are going to use next as their active model. If that model is ineligible before it is chosen to be the active model, then another model can be chosen. But this basically means I force my opponent at this point in the game to tell me which model they're going to activate next, and then they have to activate that model next. So that's really cool to kind of determine who I go with. I can basically say, right, okay, I'm going to do Prediction for 2 key, tell me who you're going to activate next, and that might then determine what I do next. And then they're stuck to having to do that unless that model goes out of action or is exhausted or in the meantime. So I really like that ability. So that's Kuhei's 2 feats. Moving down to the bottom, she gets +1 to her damage roll for melee, and she has a sidestep defense and a sweep attack. So she's got 1 special attack and 1 special defense. We've already discussed sidestep defense. Sweep attack, sweep the leg like Karate Kid. I really like this one. Both of these are 0 actions, so they don't require you to lose any dice, so you might as well do one of them when you're doing a melee exchange. Sweep attack, I think, just means that you don't do any damage, but the model you're attacking becomes prone. I will just check. Sweep attack, if the attack is successful, then the defender becomes prone. Again though, the defender suffers half of the damage, so they don't suffer no damage, they suffer half. But that's really cool if you want to put somebody on the floor. Kenko gets his slam attack, so he can actually move people as well. Kuhei just sweeps the leg there and makes them prone. So I really like that for Kuhei. And then she has a ranged ability, a ranged weapon, which we've seen already and discussed. Kuhei, also looking at the health bar, has 6 wounds, 6 health. Flipping over the card, we've gone through both the feats, and then Kuhei and all of my ninjas actually have unique effects. So these are effects that say during the starting phase, which is the start of every turn, and choose one of these following abilities, and they end at the end phase. So basically every turn, all of my ninjas get special abilities, and they have 2 to choose between. So depending on how the game is going and what I see as the most vital for that turn, I can choose, and each of them are different. So I'm going to get little tokens or little markers because it's going to get quite confusing as to which model has what. Kuhei, for example, has Elusive and Iron Mind 1. Now I'll have to just double check what these actually are. I think Elusive means I ignore people's zone of control. Elusive, this model ignores enemy model zones of control during movement. So usually, if you move into somebody's zone of control, you automatically have to stop and start fighting that model. Whereas Kuhei can just walk past people. She's elusive. She can dodge away and ignore people's zone of control. Or she can gain Iron Mind 1. Now Iron Mind comes into play when you're doing sort of fear tests or opposed key tests. So this model adds X to its highest dice roll when it performs an opposed key test and is not the active model. So if there's a lot of models that try and manipulate you using key tests like the Cult of Yuri or the Silver Moon Syndicate, they like to do opposed key tests. If somebody's targeting Kuhei, she gets to add +1 to her dice roll. So that's really powerful. Ghost has other ones, so he can become intangible, which means he can walk through walls. As the name suggests, he's a ghost. He can just walk through walls. Also, he could also gain Dodge 1. Dodge 1 I really like, and it means that you can force your opponent to re-roll one of their attack dice when they're attacking you. So during a melee exchange, this model may pick up to X. So for Ghost, it's a 1. He can force the opponent to re-roll one of their attack dice by its opponent to be re-rolled. The same dice may be re-rolled once. So I've not seen any yet, but there probably is models that have Dodge 2 or Dodge 3. So you can make your opponent re-roll 3 or 2 or 1 of their attack dice. So that's a really cool thing. I'd only probably ever make my opponent re-roll 6s or 5s, maybe even 4s, because obviously whatever they re-roll, it will be their number. If you get them to re-roll a 2 or a 3, potentially they could re-roll it to a 6, which wouldn't be great. So that's just a basic run through the stat cards, guys. Thanks again for watching. The next video coming out will be showing you my actual ninjas that I've painted up, a close-up of the ninjas, and I have started on a ninja board. It's a midnight theme, so it's going to be very dark and black and lots of shades like my ninjas are, and there's going to be little lanterns across the board with a little bit of light shining out, and hopefully a big samurai building in the middle with a removable roof and walls inside, so you can actually go into the building and walk about. I've had to think about whether it's actually going to be practical to play on. It will hopefully look beautiful, but because of some of the scenarios that you play, you need to be able to place scenario objectives, 3 of them along the centre line or a 6 in like an octagon shape. Hopefully they'll be able to go in the building or at least around the building, so I'll have to think a little bit about that. But I am going to make it so that the building can be moved and taken off the board if we're playing those certain strategies or scenarios, and have it more of an open board. There's also going to hopefully be some bridges. I'll show you in the next video. So thanks guys for watching. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more understanding. There will be other people on future episodes, so it won't just be me rambling on. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And until next time guys, this is Trials of the Michi, learning Bushido with me. Join me next time. Cheers guys.